Good morning and welcome to New York here for the Climate and Governance Initiative's webinar on board stewardship. I'm here with a fantastic set of panelists to talk about how we can drive effective climate governance in the boardroom, to hear a little bit about their experiences and to share more broadly what's going on in Climate Week New York here. I'd like to introduce you to our panel. In fact, I'd like to ask them all to introduce themselves for a little. So may I go to you first, please, Zach?
Absolutely. Zach Pomerantz. I'm with Egon Zehnder here in our New York office with a focus heavily in the travel and leisure space, working with companies kind of across the gamut of leadership needs, and really excited to be here with you today.
Great, it's fantastic to have you. Lourdes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lourdes Melgar. I'm from Mexico. I'm a non-executive director sitting on the boards of Banco Santander in Mexico, Smurfit Westrock, and Cemex currently. And I'm also a member of the board of Chapter Zero Mexico.
Brilliant. Thank you. Kenna.
Good morning. My name is Kenna Bodden, and I am based here in New York. I'm a partner and the global head of private capital at Egon Zehnder. Spend a lot of my time working with boards, and sustainability is at the forefront today. So delighted to be with this esteemed panel today.
Wonderful to have you. And last but definitely not least, Rajiv.
Good morning. My name is Rajiv Peshavria. I am the CEO of Stewardship Asia Center. It's a nonprofit think tank established by Temasek, the global investor from Singapore. And we look at mostly the opportunity side of environmental and social sustainability.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you all for being here today. So I'm going to kick off with a question. So I've just come from an event where I've been talking about the thing that I'm excited about, which is that CGI is launching an ambassador program and a set of podcasts. But I'm also excited to hear from other people as to what they're seeing, what's happened since last year, what the new trends are, and where we can be most effective in our action. So I'd really like to ask you all, what is it that you're most excited about in the boardroom? And I'll go to you first, Kenna.
Wonderful. Well, good morning again. I'm very excited about the energy and excitement that we feel here in the city this year. There's a lot going on, a lot this week in particular. And the theme of health this year that's very much a part of the dialogue is something that I'm particularly interested in connecting with other leaders around the globe to hear thoughts and exciting opportunities ahead.
Fantastic, thank you. Lourdes, have you got anything you're particularly looking forward to this week?
Certainly a set of things. One of them is that I also sit on the board of the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. And there's this very major announcement of a big commitment to bring access to energy to people in Africa and around, in the developing world in general, and the importance of, the life-changing role of clean energy in particular. So I'm very excited about that conversation, which I think is also very important in terms of equity and development.
Yeah, there's so much going on, isn't there? Zach, have you got anything particularly you're
Yeah, well, I think there's several. I think, just being able to connect with leaders and directors, really trying to move the dial forward on the topic of sustainability is extremely important. I think to Kenna's point about health, that over the last few years with coming out of the pandemic and where we've been today, the real blurring of kind of our work life and our home life and the balance between the two has been challenging for many leaders, and boards and directors are in a really particularly special, I guess, position to help leaders really find and help them with their balance there and give them that support that they need.
And it's such a tricky thing, isn't it? Finding that balance is the key to it all, and that's so hard to find. Rajiv, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, first thing, I think the number of people that are in this city from around the world this week is in itself very exciting. I mean, compared to 5 years ago, the spotlight on climate and on both environmental and social sustainability, amazing. I think because movements start when people start talking, and I think that is amazing. Secondly, I'm very excited about the fact that, up until recently, people were looking at sustainability as a cost, risk, or compliance issue. And we've been talking for a long time about changing the narrative towards growth opportunities. And finally, that's beginning to happen. The number of dialogues that I'm part of this week is testimony to the fact that people are now a little tired about talking about the cost and compliance issues and want to talk about opportunity, which is very exciting.
Yes, it is. And it's much more of a motivator the carrot and stick. The carrot's always a nicer one to have, isn't it? So those opportunities are
You
great.
bet. And there's so much opportunity that's waiting to be tapped.
So how are you seeing that translating into changing the mindset of boards to that stewardship mindset? Are you seeing that happening, and how are you seeing that happen?
You know, it's interesting. I think the first thing we need to do is to understand what stewardship is and what you as a director are a steward of. The traditional sort of meaning of stewardship, as most people understand it, particularly directors, is that I'm a caretaker, I'm a protector, and I'm a fiduciary, and therefore my only responsibility is to maximize shareholder wealth. So from a protection point of view, I think we need to understand, given the opportunity point that we were just making, that today 70 to 90% of corporate value sits in intangibles like reputation, leadership, innovation. So even if you say you're a fiduciary and your primary interest is towards the shareholder, if you don't focus on those intangibles, then what kind of a fiduciary are you? So just suffice to say that, you know, we need to understand that stewardship is not just caretaking. Stewardship is creating economic value by integrating the needs of stakeholders, society, future generations, and the environment. And that calls for very high levels of innovation. So that's the change of definition of stewardship we need. First of all, that as a director, I'm responsible not just for protection, but also for growth. And I have to, as a board director, drive innovation, make sure management drives innovation, and we can make money by addressing the very challenges that are threatening us today.
I saw a lot of nodding from the other three of you. Please feel free to, you know, what's your view on that? Are you seeing the same things, or are you seeing things slightly differently?
I'd add, I love that we start with the definition, right? So understanding, making sure that everyone's on the same page. And one of the major things about stewardship is that it's not about necessarily having all the answers, right? So one does not necessarily have to feel as though they're the expert on every topic, but asking the right questions can help drive stewardship, because it's always important to have buy-in from the stakeholders around you. And the way to get that buy-in is for you not to be didactic about what the answer is or how to stimulate growth, but to sort of say, let's think about this. Who are the constituencies we should be focused on? What are the ideas coming from this ecosystem that can help us to move the needle? So I really like that comment around it not just being the caretaker, but also in some ways, you know, not just being, I sort of say, like the reporter of the news, but also the shaper, helping to shape the news.
I love that as an analogy. That's great. Are you seeing similar in Mexico, Lourdes?
Certainly, and I think it's a very exciting moment to be to sit on a board, because it's a moment of big transformations and creativity. And as you were speaking, it reminded me a moment where I had one of those aha moments in one of my boards, especially in the CEMEX board, where, you know, it's a very hard to abate sector, the cement sector, and they're making an incredible transformation. And it was the fact of the understanding that, you know, dealing with climate issues, making them part of the strategy, not just part of the, you know, compliance regulation, but part of the innovation, part of where you invest, is really a matter of making sure that the company is going to be here 100 years from today. So it's really innovating, and in that sense, I think it's really great, because for us as board members, it's not just sitting there and checking that you're complying with regulation, but it's the fact that you're ensuring that you're doing good for the company and for the planet and for the people, of course.
And that's something I hear quite a lot, that if we can move away from it being a tick box exercise to that long-term view of creating opportunity,
right,
it
completely shifts the dial.
You know, speaking of cement, which you mentioned, is a great example. Hard to abate sector. You know, when you look at the statistics in terms of carbon footprints and all that, it's not a good story. But companies in Latin America, companies in Europe are now innovating. Companies like Holcim, for example. I mean, so the new cement, they look at the cement manufacturing process and say, you know, how can we do this in a different way? And not only the new way of making cement, the innovation that's going on there is 50% fewer emissions, it's also stronger. So that's the kind of innovation we need in just about every industry, rather than saying this is a cost, this is a risk, this is a compliance headache. How can we reinvent production? Because that's what, if the World Economic Forum is to be believed, cement included, there is $10.1 trillion of annual new business opportunities in so many sectors, and 395 million jobs by 2030. So why are we not going after that in a big way? So,
if I may add a couple of things. I mean, what I think is interesting also is that it's not a local, like a regional conversation, it's a global conversation.
Yeah.
Cemex is really innovating, for instance, the way they produce the energy needed for producing cement, especially for producing clinker, using waste, etc., making it a really good deal for the company, because energy in Europe in particular, it becomes like almost like a negative cost. So you have incredible savings, and plus you're not just innovating for your company, you are redefining the whole way you build, so it has an impact in how architects design and the kind of materials you use, and also in terms of adaptation, which is something that we really need to work with. In terms of climate change, it becomes a really interesting story. So that, I think, is what is really fascinating about it. I used to think to change the world, you need to be either in academia doing research or in public policy doing the regulation. But I'm actually discovering that companies are investing and doing so much innovation and being so creative about the way they are making sure that the companies are long-lasting, that it's also very exciting. And as board members, it's a challenge in the sense that we really need to be up to speed in terms of the knowledge and innovation,
And those new products and services that can be provided are whole new markets to be explored and expanded that well, they're new, we haven't had them before, so huge opportunities there.
Exactly, and so we need to think about the companies in a different way that we thought in 20th century. They're not going to be the same countries, the same companies that they were 10 years ago, in 10 years, for instance.
That's so true.
And I think too that, those companies also can't be managed the same way, and the directors need to be thinking a different, not that they don't think dynamically, but even more dynamically. I mean, it is truly global businesses, and how are we communicating kind of across the globe to get those best and brightest ideas, even if they might be ideas from different organizations that traditionally might have been competition or others. There are great ideas out there that everyone's going to have to kind of think forward together on to really make an impact.
I love a quote from Antonio Guterres, I think last year, which is cooperate or perish. And I think we've moved into that era now. It doesn't mean that there aren't fantastic business opportunities and we can have very strong commercial goals within our own organisations, but that cooperation will produce a bigger pie and better results for everyone if we can do that. So talking about the board and changing the way they think and changing the way they act, I've read quite often that a stronger board is a more diverse board. How do we get that diversity of thought, the diversity of culture, the diversity of geographies into boards so that we get those new ideas in?
Well, I think, a big part of it is you're going to need folks who, traditionally there's different definitions of diversity. I think there's diversity of cultural backgrounds and heritage. There's also diversity of kind of companies and my background of where I've worked through my career.
Absolutely.
I think it's a combination of two that are going to make, or we think it's a combination of two that will make the biggest impact. But I also believe it's the diversity of ideas, right? So people are going to have to be bold. They're going to have to really test the traditional concept of even what a board sometimes might have looked like or worked like. Maybe less siloed in their approach to committees and more kind of broad thinking about kind of how they work together as a true constellation of experts that can really test the boundaries of what a board can do going forward. Because again, as I was saying before, it's just a very dynamic time we live in, and it's only going to become more and more dynamic. And so the better minds we could bring to the forefront in the boardroom, especially as we have directors who sit in several boardrooms, and that constellation only grows across. Being able to bring the best from all of that is what's going to really kind of push for that, diversity going forward.
And I would just add, I agree with everything that Zach said. As you think about diversity on boards, there was a moment in time where there were certain types of things that boards were looking for. I think that's continuing to evolve. You know, one characteristic, a sort of diversity that's looked for right now is the youth, for instance, on boards, right? So boards, as boards are developing, transforming, thinking about, some have retirement ages, but many don't. There are a lot of boards that have very tenured board members, and as they think about the next generation, they want to bring in people that have had different lived experiences, whether it's they were born with a phone in their hand, or AI is not scary, it's just what is, right? And sustainability as not sort of a new catchphrase, but it's actually the way we do business. So I think as you see boards evolve, you will of course want to see gender diversity, ethnic diversity, geographic diversity, but you'll also want to see different diversity of lived experience, which I think will help to impact the way boards move forward into the next sort of generation.
That lived experience piece is so important, because you can't learn that, you have to live it. So getting that mix in the boardroom is key. Have any of you seen examples of organisations, and you don't have to give names, but organisations who've done it well, and how have they achieved that?
Yeah. Sorry, you go first, please.
No, but I've actually have seen, it is very interesting what you said, because I was thinking about that, but I've actually seen it working from going from a board that in 2018 was basically mostly, you know, seasoned senior, of course, male executives, to a really diverse group of people, where today the youngest board member is 38. Of course, has a very different outlook on things. The second youngest person is in her mid-40s, and she's an expert on cybersecurity issues, which of course is a very important topic these days for the boards. And so little by little, it has changed. And the thing is that it's not just that the energy in the boardroom has changed, it's just that the conversations have changed, the issues that go on the table, the way we talk about things. And to me, who I in that particular board, I have been the big champion for sustainability, feeling very lonely at first. All of a sudden the conversation changed, and we were able to make a big shift in terms of even appointing a CSO and really getting the conversation on the agenda of the board, etc. And so I feel that, you know, we still need the people with the experience and the very important knowledge that you need for running a good company. But you need to have that balance, and you need to make sure that everybody is taken seriously in that type of conversation. So yeah, I think it's a great approach to make sure that we can get where we need to be.
And creating that environment where you can have those conversations, where everybody's opinion is valued, from a very old traditional stance where perhaps some of those conversations couldn't have happened in the boardroom, now to one where it can. It seems to me that that's going to help us make the changes that we need to make. That people can have those conversations. Rajiv,
you know, I think boards are getting better at diversity of all kind, you know, gender, ethnicity, age, etc. But what keeps me awake at night is when it comes to diversity of mindset and diversity of, therefore, action and behavior. So you can have diverse boards, and in our recent report, Boards as Stewards of Sustainability, we have described what an exemplar board looks like that's getting these things right, but they're few and far between. Let's make no mistake about that. What happens is, however diverse a board may be, when it comes to what they spend their time on and how they conduct the board meetings, there is absolutely no change in the last 5 to 10 years. In 2018, we did our first study asking boards, how do you spend your time? 60% of time was spent on risk management, regulatory compliance, and financial management. In 2023, we did a much wider study, and then those numbers haven't changed. And as you know from the work that you all did jointly with Kantar, the global study also is saying the bulk of time is now still being spent on compliance, risk management, etc. So yeah, while boards are getting a bit diverse, that behavior is not changing. So that's the kind of mindset diversity, action diversity we also need in the boards. And that's a matter of education. That's a matter of creating a lot more awareness.
Can I ask a question on that? So in an ideal scenario, what would that percentage look like?
I don't know if there is an ideal percentage. I do know that it's very, very lopsided right now. We need to talk about opportunity. We need to talk about innovation. Because you see, yes, we need regulation. Yes, we need compliance, because that will minimize harm, further harm. So those players that they don't care about the environment, you have to stop them with rules and regulations that don't create any more harm. But if we are going to save this planet, and businesses have to thrive and make money, you will have to do that through innovation. So not enough boards are talking about how do we drive maximum shareholder wealth by addressing the existential challenges like climate change, social inequality, and cyber vulnerability. And there's plenty of money to be made, and in the process, we will also save the planet. That diversity of thought and action we're not seeing.
I would like to bring an example that I've seen actually working fantastically in terms of making these changes. And it's precisely the packaging company working in different parts of Europe and Latin America and North America. And the thing is, before it used to be called getting the license to operate. But nowadays, it's not just about getting the license to operate. It's making sure that you establish at the community level the right relationships, the right support, that you create a sustainable environment for your company to thrive. And what I've seen is that when a company goes from just the rhetoric to actually do things that are transforming the lives of people, people become the biggest supporters for those companies. When you're really taking care of a forest and you're taking care of the community in that forest, and you're helping educate the children in rural areas, when you're actually making the commitment be not just something that you do for getting that license to operate, but because you really care about the people, everything begins to change. And I think that has to do with how the CEO thinks about things, but how the board thinks about things, but also about the culture that you bring to the company and how people interact with the community. And I've seen that being something really, a very successful approach. And I think as climate change is making it more difficult for companies to operate in certain places, this type of approach will have to become, to become like the norm rather than the exception.
Have you seen that in your experience? Have you seen any good examples of where that whole social and environmental piece has sat alongside the economic commercial piece within boards?
Yeah, I think as we were talking earlier, just the global nature, the kind of bringing the different ideas to the board. I mean, I think there are several opportunities where people really kind of integrate with the communities, where they're working alongside the stakeholders, and there's it's maybe, while KPIs and kind of outcomes are important, there's more of a focus on the kind of the holistic outcome, which, whether it's in hospitality where groups are looking to build hotels at that are net zero, so that they're not taking away from these areas that, while beautiful and really, nature first, when you build new projects, it does have, it does take from the ecosystem. And so they're really focusing on designing projects that will have a different type of impact going forward, and hopefully zero impact going forward. So there's a huge shift there, and also around reusing materials, things of that nature that I think are trying to change the discussion on how we build and how we reuse existing assets.
Yeah, that circular economy and the built environment piece is really taking off now, which is great to see.
Yes.
Can I give you two very concrete examples of companies where they are actually doing this? And they've been doing it for the longest time. That's the best part. One company is Faber-Castell in Germany, the pencil makers. Now, back in the 1800s, fourth generation leader, Lothar von Faber, right? He started providing employee benefits such as housing and health insurance, etc., a full 40 years before such things became the law in Germany. Now, he wasn't doing it because of charity or because of the goodness of his heart. He said, if I can give people these benefits, they will be more loyal to the company, they will work harder and better for the company, and we will all thrive together. He had that vision then. And 40 years later, by the way, what became the labor laws in Germany, they drew heavily on Faber-Castell's experience. Fast forward to the 1980s, and every generation has put sustainability, environmental and social first in their business, and they've been hugely profitable for 270 years. Fast forward to the 1980s, when so-called the pencil industry was dying because everybody's going digital, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars of money, family money, in buying up sustainable forests in Brazil, so that 20 years later, all the wood for their pencils around the world would come from sustainability certified forestry. Now pencils were dying, and 20 years it would take for those trees to grow up, yet they did it. They innovated to make sure pencils don't die, right? And today, 100% of their wood comes from sustainably certified forests. Very quickly, another example, the Tata Group in India. They are into hospitality, to airlines, to steel, to software, you name it. 155 years of profitable growth. When they were building the first steel plant in the 1800s, before the steel plant was even ready, they built hospitals, they built schools, they built community parks, they built avenues, they built churches, mosques, not because of charity, but who would come to this remote area, engineers, people, unless we build a whole township. You ask Faber-Castell and Tata and the 500 plus examples that we have in our database now of doing well by doing good, why do you do it? How do you do it? And they say, because we put environment first, because we put society first. That's how we've lived and profited and been profitable for so long. So there are boards and companies that are getting it right. My earlier point was all about we need more of this. The proof points are there.
And is there, I agree with you entirely, we need more of this. How do we scale that? Because we have the examples, as you both said, you know, there are really good examples out there.
In my personal opinion, there's two things, and I'm sure my fellow panelists have better ideas. One is raise awareness and education. Absolutely, we need to continue to educate, continue to raise awareness, because people don't know. In our recent survey, 78% of our directors said the reason why there is no action on sustainability on our board is because we don't know. Now, in today's day and age, where everybody has a supercomputer in their pockets, what do you mean you don't know? You know, information is available at your fingertips. But anyway, we have to find ways to continue to educate, continue to inform. The other thing that we are trying to do in our own humble way is to seek the wisdom of the crowd. To create crowdsourced portals where anybody and everybody that has an idea can contribute, and anybody and everybody can use it, all for free. So there's a website called stewardshipcommons.com where anybody can contribute and anybody can consume, and it's a community. I'm very grateful that the community is growing every week organically, and we will keep it free forever. So hopefully with that, the wisdom of the crowds and a push on education and awareness, maybe we'll save ourselves in time.
I think education and awareness is certainly very important. And I think the work that, for instance, organizations such as Chapter Zero is doing in training the boards is very, very important to make sure that board members who do not have the knowledge about, you know, climate and what you can do about it, have it. But I also think, and this is something that I talk about a lot in my boards, is, you know, companies sometimes do amazing things, but they keep it as a secret. They are very humble about it. And I think we really need to showcase what we're doing, not to brag about it, but to be able to present, you know, those innovations, those approaches, what is working, what is not, so that other companies are aware of, and also that we demystify this view that certain board members have that, oh no, this is just about a problem, it's a risk, it's a challenge, and they're not seeing the whole opportunity side of it, the innovation, and the, you know, even if it were just the feeling good about doing good for the environment and for society, but also it's something that customers are demanding, especially as we're dealing with younger generations. The younger generations don't want to put up with companies that are just about profit, profit, profit. They want to make sure that, you know, you're giving back. And so I think it's important to be able to share this. And the other thing is the two examples that you presented about the pencil company and the Tata company brought to my mind that, you know, sometimes we think we need to reinvent the wheel. But in reality, many of these approaches were followed by companies like in the 19th century. You were talking about this, and I was thinking of the Monterrey group in Mexico, which really, that was a whole approach about how to, you know, make sure that they did good for the society. And the thing is, often the approach is just very at the local level. We need to think globally, especially as we're talking of global companies.
That's a very good point. And you're right, there are examples from the 19th, actually, I think possibly the 18th century globally, and there's a number of those companies, as you were saying, but I can think of others that are still in business today. So clearly it works. Right. How do we encourage that thinking in the boardroom more broadly, in a world that has been focusing on the corporate rather than the holistic?
I mean, I think part of what I was saying earlier, you have people, and to talk about diversity of boards, you have people brought in because they have a specialty in a thing, right? So you have a table, circle with people, each does a specialty, then they sit on a committee that focuses on a thing. Those people may be on 1, 2, 3, 4 different boards, and they're getting a 1,000-page binder to review, and they're having their committee meetings. So I think sometimes in all of that, what gets lost are some of these important topics like sustainability, like how we're going to change the course forward. And I think by breaking down some of these silos and really looking at that board as a constellation of leaders who then can bring the best from all the other companies, like your examples, and sharing that across of, hey, this is what I know, or Jeev's talking about, this is what I know, and really trying to drive and change the discussion in the boardroom. I mean, I talk to executives who, leading up to a board meeting, are prepping for and they're talking through it, their committee that they work with. But many times the other committees need to know this also, so they end up talking the same discussion maybe 3, 4, 5 times. There's a lot of mind share for that, and there's a lot of time for that. So if there's a way to kind of rejigger that a bit, there's probably a lot of time to talk about these other important topics and really drive the discussion forward.
I like that constellation idea, and those breaking down silos, absolutely, because it's much more about the system and those interlinking systems rather than individual siloed areas. And how one of the things we come across is board members saying, but I'm not a climate expert. But that's okay. You don't need to be. You just need to be interested and ask questions. And giving people enough knowledge, but also enough belief in themselves to ask that difficult question, even though they know they're not the climate expert on the board. It's really important, I think.
You have to be bold.
You do.
You have to be willing
really
to put
do.
yourself out there and show that you don't know. Maybe you know a little, you don't know
Yeah.
enough, and it's okay to be the first one to take the leap.
Exactly.
And if you take the leap, then other people will take the leap with you. It's like going to a workshop and someone doing an icebreaker because nobody knows each other. Sometimes you need the first person to raise their hand and ask and put themselves out there. And I think that will give people the comfort and the space to feel like they can do that also. And then hopefully that will start really just going out across other groups.
We've got an interesting question in, actually, and please, if anybody who's online wants to put some questions in the chat, they will come through and I can ask. One about what climate competencies are needed to apply successfully for future board seats? Or indeed, do you need to have climate competencies? It'll be a question.
I think we are all learning at the same time. Humanity has never dealt with something like this before, at least in our generations, right? And we're all learning, and there are people who are making it their business to learn as much as they can, and there are people who are digging their head in the sand. So I don't know if there are specific climate competencies that we should be focusing on. Maybe we should. But I think the most important thing is if you sit on a board, any board, it is your responsibility to get out there and learn as much as you can. At the end of the day, as Lourdes was saying, companies of tomorrow are not going to be the same as companies of today. Gone are the days where you could make money by hanging on to competitive advantage. Today we live in a totally interconnected and transparent world, and as long as the consumer or customer has a choice, they are going to go to a company that is innovating on the edge to produce a better world, right? And so it is up to every single board member to educate themselves as much as they want. There is no excuse anymore. I don't know, therefore I cannot do anything. 78% of people are saying that, or directors are saying that? No. So we all, 10 years ago, did any of us know as much as we know today about climate and the science of it? No. The reason we know is because we read, we listen, we seek out. And that's the first thing that every board director has to understand. You have a huge responsibility. You're sitting on a board. Educate yourself.
I would just add that boards typically are looking for a systems-wide view. So it's unlikely that they're going to select this particular individual because they are climate competent, whatever that might mean. but they're looking for board members that bring an interdisciplinary approach to the boardroom. And so obviously you're likely to have a spike in something. I think we're too early on this journey to say that you can be the climate expert, since no one out there seems to be. But I agree that having a sensitivity to it, having the willingness to bring it to the table and ask the right questions and make it not something, as I said, that's something unto itself, but it's part of the entire operating fabric of what these organizations need to be doing. I think that is something that will help you.
I've been working on the climate and energy field for over 15 years now. And what I have to say is that I've learned a lot from my colleagues who have less knowledge than me, less technical knowledge than me, from the questions they ask, from the lens that they bring, from the issues that they raise, that maybe because I was focusing so much on these more like scientific knowledge and understanding of things, I was missing out. And I think that's what is the beauty also of the diversity we were talking about at the board. You don't need to be a climate expert. We'll have the CSO that will bring to the table the issues that we need to be aware of. We can always have, a specific topic that can be presented to us by experts. You don't need to have that knowledge. What you need is to be able to look at things in terms of where it fits in terms of your strategy, of your risks, how do you mitigate them, or where are the opportunities, and how all of this affects your balance sheet. And I think it's also it's more willingness of learning and of having fun, because it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. I have another question from the floor. We were talking about having diverse boards, and Kelly, you brought up having intergenerational boards so that we have older people and younger people and people in between. And the question is, what is the most important thing that a younger person can do to set themselves up for board level? Because we all know that historically, it's the sort of thing that people have done later on in their careers, or maybe sometimes it's their last role in their careers. So if you're a younger person, it can feel quite daunting, and it can be difficult to get that first door to open for you. So what do you think people can do to help themselves get at least on the short list for a board seat?
Well, we do a lot of board search and place board directors all the time, so I'll take that at least from the beginning.
Thank you.
At the end of the day, each board member has to have a sort of unique value proposition. What are you bringing to the table? It's not just about the age. They're not just going to select someone because they're younger, but they have something that they're bringing to the table. So master your domain, whatever that may be. The board is not looking for you to come in and be an executive and run the company, right? But they're looking for you to sort of have, they say, kind of nose in, fingers out, right? You want to be someone who can be a peer to the other board members, can provide a unique angle, and with what you have done to date, demonstrate success and impact. So that's what I would recommend for any sort of early career board seeker, is to understand, if someone says, why do you want to be on a board? To understand why you want to be on that board and what you bring to the table. Sometimes I think people think being on a board is like a rite of passage. At a certain point, I should be on a board, and it sounds good. But you actually have to have a real rationale for why that particular board is somewhere where that you can contribute. And so I encourage people to think about that. It's not just what's in it for you as the individual, but it's also what's in it. What are you going to bring to that other side of the table?
I mean, to add to what you just said, you look at Silicon Valley, right? Some of the most innovative businesses were built by people who were very, very young, right? And today, cyber vulnerability is a huge threat, existential threat. And some of the work that's going on in that area is also being driven by young people. So I would agree that, in your chosen domain, you demonstrate thought leadership, innovation, and out-of-the-box thinking, and you will be sought by boards. Because if you can build a huge hundreds of billions of dollar company when you're just sort of under 40 years old, then why can't you sit on a board? So I think there's plenty of people out there who have domain expertise, and I think the most progressive boards, and we found some of them, are looking for such younger people, but people who've proven expertise in their domains, because there are things which are very technical these days, which younger people understand much better than people my generation. So I think the most exemplar boards are realizing that and are inviting younger people.
So why are we not seeing more boards doing that? Because we agree that we would like diversity in all sorts, and age is one of those things, and we agree that there are some, as you say, billion-dollar companies set up by people in their 20s. The expertise are there, but if you look at the demographic of board members, they're not. So what are the blockers? Is it just a matter of time and it will filter through, or what should we do to speed that process up?
In my view, it's again comes back to education and awareness. There's just not enough awareness about these things. There are a few exemplar boards that are getting it right, and they're great stories. We collect these stories because we want to use those to encourage other people. That's what we do at our center. But there are very few. For every good story, there are like 50 who are not. And so we just have to continue to educate and show them the possibility that it's actually not in their detrimental to their interest, that you can drive superior shareholder growth by changing your behavior and by addressing the very existential challenges that exist. And the more they understand, the more their eyes are open, the more they will do it.
I actually think it is happening, and perhaps we're not seeing it because it's a process, and it takes time to have the turnover. I mean, you're not going to get rid of an entire board, but sometimes you have to. But but usually it takes a little bit of time. But I can tell you that I'm seeing it in the boards where I sit. In one of them, when I arrived, the average age was like closer to 70 more plus. And right now it's getting to be more in the 60. And you may say it's not young enough, but that means that we have people who are like 38, who are like 43. It's the same way that we've been able to get more women on boards. Perhaps it's a matter of regulation. In this case, I think it's a matter of incentivizing young people to dare to come, to open the door for them to be open-minded. And I think it will happen. It will happen.
That's really encouraging to hear.
I just add that we're talking a little bit about boards as a monolith, and they can be so different, right? There are large public company boards, depending on where we sit today. We may be talking more about public company. There are also smaller private company boards. There are also family-owned companies that are huge, right? And there's not a one-size-fits-all for board service. I think, often we think of sometimes the biggest, most corporate boards, but there are many ways to have board service for folks at different points in their career. And so I think never forget that. At some point you'll be sitting on multiple boards like our esteemed panels here, but early in your career you may not. So I think, again, not thinking of it as a monolith, recognizing that, as I mentioned before, many boards do not necessarily have retirement ages. So for some people, they're going to stay on that board as long as they can. And unless the board's going to expand, sometimes there's not an opportunity to refresh as early as one might want. So I agree, you're not going to see boards just instantly change, but it will happen brick by brick over time. It's just the nature of the way the world is evolving.
And one thing for younger people who want to get into corporate listed boards, etc., is that it's always a good idea to maybe start, if you can, like going to boards of nonprofits, and from there start building your experience, and then be able to go to larger boards, to make yourself known, not just by your success in a specific field, but also by the type of board service that you can bring.
And if I can add one more thing to that, and that was where I wanted to go, is I think start somewhere. Right? You don't have to start with, I need to be on the board of a major, global 100 company. I think start with something in your community, a nonprofit, join a hospital, do something, because what I found early in my career was joining boards of groups like the Museum of Natural History here in New York. You start young with people who are in diverse industries, and as we grew up together, those people end up on boards, and those are your relationships as you're going. And so while at Egon Zehnder we might place a large percentage of board directors for companies, there may still be half of them out there that are coming from the relationships where directors know somebody and they're recommending them to somebody else. And so, I'd say start early. And also, we also recommend to CEOs and folks that we work with on the day we'll introduce them to younger executives that are just coming up because we see high potential there. We're saying, hey, this should be someone on your radar for when the time is right, when something opens, so that there's a relationship building, and it's not just through like a search that we're finding someone and saying, here, this is the person we think would make sense for you.
On that point, here's the thing. When you're looking to fill a board position, what are you looking for? You're looking for relevant experience, relevant knowledge, and connected to the business model of the company so that this person can add value to the board, right? In the old days, it used to take a lifetime to gather those experiences because the only way to learn was through the years of apprenticeship, etc. Today, knowledge gathering and education has accelerated thanks to connectivity, and that is why very young people are creating multi-billion-dollar companies. So what we should be looking for in a younger person or an older person in terms of a board seat is exactly the same. What have you given to the world? And if you have achieved it in 20 years instead of 40, so be it. It's the experience, it's the ability to innovate, and your track record that has proven that you are a thought leader here. And I think today, that is why we should be looking for more younger people, because today, what was not possible to do before 50 years you're able to do it in 10, thanks to overall acceleration of life.
That's a really interesting point. I have another question from our audience, which is, as you diversify your board, how can you foster a safe environment so that new ideas can be expressed and heard? Actually, I'm going to ask you first, Lourdes, because you were talking about originally being sort of the only voice on the board.
In this case, I really think the leadership of the chair is very important, because I've seen it in different boards work differently, and when the chair is open to different views and respects people who really come from, who are challenging the traditional approach to things, it really helps to get going the conversations. And it's also a matter of being a good board member. I think, I've been in really dysfunctional boards. It's very difficult when that happens. It's important to be a decent person who respects others and is open to listening and to opening your mind to that. I think that's part of an internal process that one has to do, but it's a must.
Thank you. And any other thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. I think it's the chair, the leadership of the chair is extremely important. I've seen boards where, when younger people come and present information and present ideas, there is a lot of openness, and there are other boards that feel threatened by it. And so absolutely the leadership of the chair is incredibly important in this case.
And I would say, as you're thinking about joining a board, trying to suss that out ahead of joining the board is helpful. You may have the good fortune of being able to be through a board through its transition and reinvention, but early days, it's something that you can diligence to some extent. How do board decisions get made? Is everything a meeting before the meeting? Are people texting on the side in the meeting and not actually saying what they think? Does the lead director or chair allow interaction with other members of the executive team that aren't on the board? Do they come to present to the board? What is that access that you are permitted as a board member? All of those things help you to understand the dynamic and the ethos of the board that you're joining. And you ideally don't want to go into a situation where you're blindsided when you show up.
I think this is a really important point. And it's important for any board member, actually, whether you're young or whether you're a woman or whatever, it's to learn sort of like the way things work in that organization. There are always there is not a blueprint for everybody, it's each one has their own. And it is important because if you don't take the time at the beginning to observe and listen and, try to see how things are done there, then it's very difficult to really have the impact. And then to the point you said, yeah, I have had positive experiences, but I also, at the beginning, it was not a positive experience. So sometimes you just have to sit there and, try to be the champion for a cause, but you need to thread, with care so that you can build alliances and you can convince people and you can sort of get the topic on the table or whatever, and that takes time. It's not like something that happens from one day to the next. You have to be patient. And what we're talking about for young people, I think also applies in many boards for women, still for women. I mean, there are places where the resistance for women, for minorities, for younger people are still very strong.
Yeah, that's a good point. Changing the subject, another question from the floor. What other levers, such as remuneration, can successfully drive board behaviours? And I presume they mean good board behaviours. What levers can we, or can be used to make sure that the board is behaving well and effectively and efficiently?
One of the things that we actually help with in our business is we do board reviews, so board effectiveness reviews. And we encourage boards to do those periodically. Of course, we'd love if they were with Egon Zehnder, but there are others that do that. And the idea behind that is, how is the board working together? Are they effective? Are decisions being made collectively by the board appropriately, not just by the chair? What are ways that how does communication work? Could it be working better? Is the board thinking about succession in the right way? Are the committees true committees? Right? All of these things can actually be assessed and developed, right? So there's no perfect board, but there are opportunities to consistently improve the board, but you actually have to check on them.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, these things don't happen by magic, right? So there needs to be some willingness to invest in assessing whether the board is actually working to the best of its ability or not.
I think generally it's a curiosity, right, about both how we're working, how I'm working, how we work together. I think all of those things are extremely important and something that we focus on a lot, because it is a journey. Yeah. You know, you might have a new chair come on, you may have an existing chair who wants to try to look at things differently, and you really need everyone in together, and sometimes bringing in a third party to assess it, you know, from outside and give just their view, not telling you what's right, wrong, or different, but just showing the data. Sometimes people need to see it, can be quite eye-opening.
I think one big question that's missing in what you just asked is the why question. Why do I want to be on this board? Very few people ask that question. And you have to be very clear as an individual that I want to be on a board because I want to provide a certain kind of leadership. And very few ask that question. Even when we are filling board positions, the committee is responsible for board positions, and the people responsible for filling board positions, they build pages upon pages of what kind of experience and expertise we require. But the why question is missing from both sides. So if we want to drive that kind of behavior that we are talking about, which is boards are supposed to enable companies to do well by doing good, that why question is extremely important.
And you're right. Yeah, it's hardly ever asked.
Exactly.
And yeah, very good point. We have another question. I'm going to ask this, and then I'm going to give you the heads up. I'm going to ask each of you for the one thing that you would advise a new board member looking to be a steward in the boardroom. What would be the one thing? So just so you can be thinking about that now. But the question from the floor is, how can climate and nature-related reporting and disclosure be more than a tick box exercise for the boardroom?
In my experience, again, and I guess I have very positive experiences, but I think it is. Because what has happened is that, yes, the reporting is very important, but the reporting comes from having a strategy, having KPIs, and making sure you comply to them. So it's part of the strategy, it's part of where you want to bring the company. And so what I'm seeing is that something that used to be sort of a, you know, maybe 5-6 years ago, a conversation on the side, today it's really a major conversation about what kind of company we are, how we go about doing things, and, you know, how we make sure that we can communicate this. And the thing is, for some companies, it's just one reporting. Some companies still do the double reporting, but some are just doing one reporting because it is who you are. So I know this is not done everywhere, but I think as more the mindset changes to seeing it as part of who you want to be and where you want your company to be, it's going to become something that is of the essence and not just check
Just compliance checking.
Yeah.
That's good.
we see that there are 5 kinds of boards and 5 kinds of companies when it comes to this, especially your question about reporting, right? On the extreme left are the greenwashers. They are willfully deceiving. Then you have the in denial. What climate change? What inequality? Even if these things exist, it's not my problem. We pay our taxes. It's somebody else's. Then you have the window dressers. Look, everybody's talking about sustainability. We better do a few things and look good. It's more form than substance. Then you have the checkboxers. We do exactly what the law says and no more because we don't want to be in trouble with the law. And finally, you have the real steward leaders. They don't even just see themselves as stewards of shareholder wealth. They see themselves as stewards of planet Earth and humanity and demand that their companies actually innovate enough to find ways to make money by addressing those very challenges that are threatening it. And we find that there are less than 20% in the steward leader category. And all we need is to get to 20%, by the way, because if 80-20 and the Pareto principle is still valid, which it is, if 20% of companies and boards actually can become and establish a steward leader mindset, we will save the planet and the economies will continue to grow.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Now I know, thank you for your reply, because now I know why I'm on such great boards, and it's because I did ask the why question. And I wanted to be in companies that were actually committed to doing sustainable work, who were committed to them. And so I think that's part of my bias in terms of my replies.
So you're in the 20% already.
Well, I am at least in 2 companies that are in that 20%.
Very good.
And it's very exciting. But you did say something that is an absolute truth. I mean, apart from the greenwashing and all of that, one of the frustrating things that you can find in the board conversations is when people start saying, oh, but the SEC regulation only goes this far or has not been approved or we shouldn't do it. And you're like, if we won't go back that path, it's not just that you go back, you go back to the regulation, it's all the lost opportunities that you have. You're leaving a lot of value on the table and your reputation will be crushed.
Because steward leaders go beyond regulation and beyond measurement and reporting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do as I promised. I'm going to ask that question. I'm going to start with Zach and work down. So Zach, what's the one thing you'd advise a new board member looking to be a steward in the boardroom?
Well, I think any new board member, it's important to take a moment to listen. I do think it's important when you're coming into any new leadership group that you're listening first and kind of taking everything in before you kind of come in with a big bang, if you will. But I do think, it's what I've said a few times today, we need people who are going to come in and be bold and be willing to take some risks and put themselves out there and show that it's okay and that everyone's going to be fine. And by kind of giving that type of push to the rest of the group, hopefully it will start to permeate the board and hopefully it will spread further into other boardrooms. And over time, you'll have a really open dialogue that hopefully will go across not only boards, but across organizations and leaders who are willing to ask tough questions and hopefully allow other people to help, because we all need to help each other or we're not going anywhere together.
Thank you. Lourdes.
I would say, I agree with everything Zach said. So what I would add is be curious about the company and the sector it works in and about what's happening to that sector, and be curious about getting to know how the company works more, like meet the people, if you're manufacturing, go to the plants, really try to understand what it is that it does beyond what you see in the boardroom.
Thank you. Anna.
So we're building, so we're listening, we're learning, we're asking good questions with that curiosity and the listening. And remember that if you are there, you're there for a reason. Don't be there just to take up space, right? Make an impact.
Thank you. Rajiv.
2 things, not just for a new director, but any director. One is demand to see sustainability first growth strategies. Everybody wants to make money and your job is to make sure the company maximizes profit, but demand to see that the money and the profit maximization is happening on the basis of a strategy that puts environmental sustain by solving human problems. So demand to see those strategies. Number 2, demand to see evidence that the company is building a DNA and culture of steward leadership throughout the organization. And there are ways to measure that. There's ways to see that. Happy to speak offline on that, but those are the two things that every board director should be doing. Demand to see sustainability first growth strategies, demand to see evidence that a culture of steward leadership is permeating throughout the organization.
Thank you. And sadly, we're at time, so all that remains to me is say thank you so much to all our panelists, to Zach, Lourdes, Kenna, Rajiv. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you to NASDAQ and Egon Zender. Thank you to the Climate Governance Initiative for putting this on, and wish you all a very happy rest of Climate Week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.